Planet Strand.
One of the oldest of the fifth and latest expansion colonies in the Orion Confederacy, Strand is considered one of its economic powerhouses. Cosmopolitan and developed, yet hasn't been stymied by old money and established hierarchies compared to the older colonies within the Orion sector. Even the biggest megacorporations have limited influence due to the presence of economic power blocks within Strand, such as the Bedford estate. Geologically, however, Strand is stunningly unremarkable. Its tectonics are stable, its alkaline waters sterile of any life, even before human habitation. Its atmosphere consisted mostly of nitrogen and methane, making Strand resemble antediluvian Earth, though Strand itself is much older, currently estimated to be 5.2 billion years old. However, the planet's stability, along with being rich in minerals and hydrocarbons, made it an attractive colonization prospect. Most of the planet's population is extremely urbanized, due to the toxic conditions outside of the cities, with Logan's Pass being the largest, as well as serving as the planetary capital. Despite this, the planet's soil, rich in hydrocarbons and nitrates, has made it a boon for agriculture. This, along with mining industry as well as the raw manufacturing capabilities of the cities, has made Strand extremely self-reliant, and thus the population maintains a cool distance with the more centralized culture of the Confederacy. As such, Strand has served over the years as a cultivating environment for insurrection and rebellion. The Proxy. Written, illustrated and voiced by Pierre Grange. Narration and character audio by 11 Labs. Chapter 3. The Auditor. Unit 66 had failed, and failed spectacularly. Her target was now releasing press conferences, laying the blame directly at UCH, demanding hearings and inquiries from the Confederate Assembly, calling for Mercurius to explain himself and his company. In UCH's intelligence office, everyone was dropping everything else that they were doing to help mitigate the disaster. Missions were being cancelled left and right, their proxies being pulled out, and their overseers being immediately taken off active duty. UCH's Strand division was now scrubbing itself of any dirty laundry, cooking books, doing everything it can to make itself look as clean and conscientious as possible, and most importantly, making sure everyone knew who was exactly to blame: Frank Dearell. It was obvious he was the one in charge. This was his department after all. Poor Peter Callahan, whose warnings had been ignored by everyone, were all of a sudden being given the highest level of scrutiny. All the suits and ties who happily ignored him now all of a sudden would not shut up about him. Management dropped the ball by ignoring Callahan. I and everyone else in bioengineering spent the whole of Tuesday mulling over his reports, one would say. I told my manager about this, about my own Unit 83 and how he was not given enough time to recalibrate. I would have mentioned it before, but Callahan had already spoken for everyone. Someone else happily chimed. Such were the toady conversations in the intelligence office. They came in so many forms, but they all had the same conclusion. Frank Dearell had fucked up. In the office of Peter Callahan, Frank Dearell could only look in silent horror. He knew that upper management would blame him. Peter had followed the normal channels and thus was blameless in the eyes of internal affairs and human resources. He would probably get a promotion, maybe get Frank's job, since Frank himself would certainly be fired at best. But the best was no longer an option, because Peter Callahan, Proxy Overseer for Unit 66 of the UCH's Strand Intelligence Office, was dead. His head was missing, and his thoughts and memories were splattered across the consoles and equipment behind him. Not only that, but the console from which Callahan could command Unit 66, as well as the systems to control and contain her, were destroyed, smashed and burnt. There were also other pieces of equipment that had also been damaged deliberately. Unit 66 had undergone epiphany, the insurance did not activate, and any means for UCH to reach out to her were severed. Frank Dearell began to formulate solutions to this problem. He would not be able to explain this away or push the issue to some patsy. Everyone had already reached the consensus, below and above him, that this was entirely his fault. Anything he said or did to recuse himself would only open him to litigation. He needed to leave. To leave Strand, the Confederacy, all of human space. He might need to venture beyond to the quote-unquote safe territory of the machines, which was far from safe at all. He will start now, pack his bags, empty out a few slush funds he had access to and leave. He took a step away from Peter's office.
Leaving us so soon?
Dearil froze. His bowels tightened and his blood ran cold. His body began to sweat profusely.
I needed to report this to...
To me. That is who you need to report this to. You are going to tell me everything, answer every question I ask, and depending on your answer, you may be given permission to leave.
The man standing behind him was none other than Adachi Suzuki, UCHE's auditor for their Strand division. Despite his title, he had little to do with the corporation's finances. His job was to deal with what those in charge described as discrepancies. Discrepancies such as Frank Dearil. He was now looming over Dearil, an easy feat considering that Suzuki seemed to be a foot taller than just about everyone in the office, along with the fact that when people met with Mr. Suzuki, they only met him once and never again. His stony, humorless visage reflecting his grim role in the megacorp.
Let's get started, shall we?
Suzuki pulled out a datapad and started tapping it slowly and deliberately. Frank was frozen in cold terror, torn between curiosity on the datapad and not allowing himself to break eye contact.
Peter Callahan had reported that Unit 66 was severely behind on maintenance and recalibration. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Hacky.
Which you did. I have checked the office bulletins and messaging networks. His efforts in communicating are indeed commendable, if only his warnings had them heeded.
It was not my fault. I would have gladly given him the time.
But you didn't you? Of course you didn't. Why would you? You are the administrator of the intelligence office for UCH Strand. Why should you bother doing your job?
Suzuki slammed the datapad on the ground and lifted Frank off the ground so they were eye to eye, before slamming him on the doorframe of Peter's office. If Frank Dearil had any sense of corporate invincibility, it was gone now, vanished and replaced with a whimpering worm desperate not to be crushed.
But Unit 66 was Peter's responsibility. Unit 66 performance is part of his Oblivet contract.
It is a poor shepherd who blames his flock, Mr. Dearil. This failure is yours and yours alone.
Suzuki dropped Dearil with an ignominious thud.
Unlike you, I have paid close attention to Mr. Callahan's work, considering that many of Unit 66's sorties were conducted under my request. Some of those requests involved a lot of blood with our friends, our enemies. People and places UCH is not supposed to be dealing with, if you understand me. Dirty secrets that, if only a fraction were to become publicly known, would implicate the entirety of UCH. We would be bankrupted by the court fees and litigation alone. And that information that can put the entirety of this mega corporation in genuine peril now exists inside the head of a proxy running wild and free.
The terror that Dearil was feeling was quickly supplanted with the greater horror of his negligence, and the presence of Adachi Suzuki was now far more understandable.
I see that the scope of this calamity has become known to you. Any potential death inflicted on you is meaningless now compared to the sins you have committed. Billions of souls are reliant on UCH for their income and standard of living, and you have now put all of that in jeopardy for those poor people. Such a shame.
Suzuki drew out a large pistol out his jacket. Dearil didn't move, staring off in the distance, his eyes fixed on the weight of his failure.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Dearil. Rest assured, I will clean up your mess and your family will be properly compensated by our insurers. Unit 66 is now no longer your concern. May your retirement remind our other employers and employees that Universal Consumer Holdings does not tolerate negligent management.
He pulled the trigger. There was a flash of fire, a crack of thunder, and soon nothing left of Dearill's upper body except red mist, smoke and ash. It was good he had done all the forensic work on Peter Callahan before meeting with Frank Darrell. Mercurius was coming to Strand in a few days, and he would not inconvenience the chairman with the issue of the rogue Proxy being unresolved until his arrival. He tapped the communicator by his ear.
Mr. Falkier, so sorry to disturb you at this late hour, but I am in desperate need to find a Proxy. I will send you the details of her appearance in a few minutes. Tell me, how much money would it take for someone in the drops to sell out a guest that they had sworn to protect? That little. Then send it to all your little birds and spiders found there. I will give 3 times that amount if they can provide me with the Proxy's location and proof of their claim. Thank you. Cheers.
Now that the net has been cast, it was now a matter of time to wait for his prey to be snared. Now all that was left was to gather an appropriate amount of additional security forces and head down to the drops. Before he did, there was one last matter to attend. He entered Peter Callahan's office. He stood in front of the dead overseer. Clasping his hands and lowering his head solemnly, he began to quietly pray.
Dear God, please be lenient in your judgment of Peter Callahan. Whatever sins he committed, he did not deserve to be murdered so callously. The universe is now lesser for his loss. I will now go and find his disobedient slave. Then I shall seek vengeance for him by bringing his killer to justice. May my hunt be a good one.
It is quite the experience to wake up and know nothing about who, where, or what you are. But that was the experience that Winter was feeling. She knew words, names, her name, places, events, history. But she didn't know who she was. She had no memories of being Winter, no friends or family. Everyone she knew, she could not help but see it like an outsider looking in, as if there were glass between her mind and her memories. It was a nauseating sensation. She was lying on a bed, an especially hard and uncomfortable one. The apartment she was in was clearly not in a wealthy neighborhood. There was a window from which she could see dilapidated buildings connected to each other with mismatched cables and laundry lines, with the sound of deranged screaming and shouting, the sort only made by people too drugged up to be really aware of their surroundings. But the apartment she was in was not some junkie's den or out-of-luck layabout. It was immaculately clean, with very little furbishment or decoration. It was utterly Spartan, in a cold, inhuman way. The only thing that made the place seem lived in, aside from Winter's bed, were a few piles of books. Winter was confused and concerned, though no longer in regards to her identity. That could wait. She needed to know about where she was and how she got there. She considered that this could be her own home. Unlikely. None of her memories indicated that this would be a place she would live. Her life, as far as she could put together, was one of corporations and government. Then perhaps a safe house? No. For some reason, she knew she couldn't go to a safe house anymore. She couldn't confirm it, but her gut told her she was now enemies with the people she used to work for. She couldn't help but harumph in frustration. There was too little information. Her meditation was interrupted as a man with black eyes entered the apartment, washing his black metallic hands.
You're finally awake. My name is Scrimshaw. You are safe here.
Auditors. While auditors are usually referred to matters in regards to finances and accounting, in the realpolitik between nation-states, megacorporations, collectives and other special interest groups in human space, an auditor is the polite term for a special agent who has been given exceptional levels of discretion in regards to protecting their master's interests. Most auditors operate alone to minimize paper trails and red tape, since auditors very rarely operate with the rules and laws of their employers by design. Auditors are often given full authority to use any asset or resource that their employers possess, since calling upon an auditor is usually the final and desperate solution to a critical issue. Since they have the total endorsement of their employers, no matter the actions they take, auditors are rightly feared by other employees, as auditors are often free to kill, interrogate, and perform other malicious actions on anyone if it helps them accomplish their goals. Despite this, it has been noted by many sociological circles that auditors and their default behavior should result in enormous instability in society, and their destructive habits, while stabilizing for their masters, often causes power struggles elsewhere. Yet no such instability has managed to emerge in human space. The two theories to explain this are that the prevalence of auditors everywhere means that the auditors themselves are often tasked to stabilize the instability that their peers often cause, while the other is that the auditors are simply acting in concert with each other, regardless of allegiance, in support of some grander conspiracy.